Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. This is our second session of Building Life Science Adventures 2023. And the topic of the conversation today is what is the earning potential in life sciences? So I'm delighted to be joined today by Viren, Philippa, and we do have Beck in the background. We're just sorting out some technical glitches there, but yeah, delighted to be joined by these guys today. And we're going to start off the session with a presentation from Viren, and it's all about the salary survey, which will be released soon, and that's in collaboration with New Scientists and SRG. So really looking forward to getting some hot off the press insights there. Just a few housekeeping points before we get going. If you don't mind keeping your microphones on mute throughout the panel discussion, that would be great. But we do like these sessions to be interactive, so please put questions in the chat box, and we'll feed them in throughout the session, or we'll save a bit of time for Q&A at the end. If you don't mind, yeah, just keeping videos off as well, that would be brilliant. And also just to highlight that closed captions are enabled if you do want to use those. So I'm going to hand you over to Viren now. I'm just going to pull up these slides, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you.
So can you see that all okay? What's that? Can you see the slides?
Yes, I can indeed. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining. So as Jasmin mentioned, I'm Viren Vagdama. I'm the Global Sales Manager for New Scientist Jobs. We are a leading life sciences job board in the UK, covering all STEM sectors also, specifically across UK, Europe, North America, and Australia. So this survey in particular is in partnership with SRG, who are a market-leading science, engineering, life sciences recruitment agency working across UK, Europe, and North America also. So with regard to the survey, we've been running this for over 10 years to all three different sort of geographical locations, UK, Europe, and North America. Though we've been running the survey a little bit longer, specifically in the UK, which is great. So the salary survey in particular is really sort of there to provide a detailed insight into salaries, and offers us a chance to really dissect some of the information to greater detail and give a real good sort of year-on-year comparison. So today in particular, I want to be running through sort of some of the top line results, and the full report will be released, as Jasmin mentioned, but I thought it would be quite important to actually share some of the results that we've had. Some are quite bold, some are quite shocking, but it'll be good to get a general overview for you guys. So next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So to give you a bit more of an overview of the survey itself, and to provide a real robust sample, we went out to market and marketed the survey as extensively as possible, along with our partners SRG. We actually had a huge sample size to work with. However, we made sure that we removed, any spam data, any data and respondents that are outside our specific geographical locations, and we actually managed to get one of the best sample sizes we've had so far, which is around 4,000 scientists. Now, as I mentioned, very specifically, we want to look at 3 regions and look at them well, right? So that being UK, Europe, and North America. With the data we had, we managed to track a lot of different touch points with our respondents. So we were dissecting information based on industry to job level, gender, diversity, and with the 3 locations specifically over the last 10 years. With the data we received, we found that a larger respondents base was from the UK. Second was North America at just around 1,000, and Europe around 500. So we actually had a really, really good sample size, and gender split was fairly consistent throughout all three regions. Next slide, please. Wonderful, thank you. So let's dive straight into it, right? Average salaries over the last 10 years. So we've been fortunate to actually be running the survey for actually 16 years for the UK, and diversity and expanding the survey to UK, Europe, and North America. We are just at a key point here that's not on the survey is actually UK salaries. The average salary actually started at £28,000 in 2006, so it's quite a substantial increase, you know, over the time that we've had. Now, what's worth noting in particular, the largest increase was nearly 19%, and that was actually in Europe, and that was a comparison from the year before. Whereas the smallest increase of salaries was in North America, up by 5.5%. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we also, one of the other areas we looked at, which was quite interesting to see the size, the average salary based on the size of company that the respondent is working for. And for this presentation in particular, I brought up the UK information, but it was actually quite contrary to what a lot of people think, in that going to a huge corporate, you would potentially get the highest salaries. Now, whilst that may be true, we actually found the sort of startups 1 to 10 offered the highest level of salaries available across the sectors. Across the size of the businesses, but the smallest, the slightly sort of larger companies, when we're looking at something, a startup when they're in growth mode, actually offered less competitive salaries in the marketplace, which was quite interesting to see. I've actually put a orange line on the graph to show the average salary, just for indication purposes. Next slide, please. Perfect. So looking at the gender pay gap, this was again some quite shocking results. We found women were earning broadly £6,500 below the UK national average. Sorry, I say national average, the average UK salary. But the gap has actually widened, which was the shocking part of this, right? It's widened from 6,500 in 2021. Now, looking at men and their earnings, they're actually earning £5,500 above the average UK salary, but their gap has actually reduced from 6,000 to 5,500. So there is some good news, but it seems that, you know, the gap is still very, very large, right? It's around £12,000, which is still very, very significant. And looking at this data and sort of dissecting it by age a little bit more, we found the largest gap was actually at the 45 to 54 age group, where we also found sort of a similar sort of gap was found at sort of the junior roles, at 25 to 34, junior to mid, and then the extremely senior side as well, experience, which is 55 plus. So quite alarming results as well, and something we will definitely take to market, and it's something that, yeah, it's something definitely we'll be covering as well in the New Scientist magazine. Next slide, please. Now, covering the diversity pay gap was another key data point that we wanted to cover. Now, we found the largest gap in salary between ethnic groups was 30.5%, and that was between the white ethnic group and the black ethnic group. All the comparisons in the table below are against the white ethnic group. Now, we found, you know, whilst Asian and other ethnic groups have the second largest gap. It was still half that of the Black ethnic group. Still significant, you know, is still something to think about. However, what was interesting was the mixed and multiple ethnic groups seem to have a very slight drop in salary compared to the white ethnic group. So these are quite interesting and quite shocking, as I said, results that we've seen so far. And as I mentioned, this presentation is really just a real brief sort of cover of the actual salary survey report, which will be launched next month, and where we will be providing far much more information, which will be useful for everyone, really. Next page, please, Jasmin. Thank you. So, as I mentioned, you know, would love to have you download, read the report, find out more information. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. We run this survey every single year. Normally we launch around October, November time. So please do keep an eye out for this. But for the final report, please do come to jobs.newsidis.com. Alternatively, please do come to srgtalent.com and look under guides and reports for the release of the latest report. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. That was really interesting, and that's going to lead us nicely into the second part of this session. But I thought maybe just for the benefit of our audience, if you could maybe tell us a little bit about your career journeys and how you got to where you are today before we get going. Philippa, I'm wondering if you want to go first.
Okay, so yeah, to introduce myself, I work for SRG. I've actually been at SRG for almost 20 years. I'll be honest, I fell into recruitment. It wasn't necessarily what I chose to do, but after a short stint, I did a science degree, loved science, but I quickly realised that the lab just wasn't for me. I perhaps didn't have the patience for laboratory work, but I wanted to stay in science, and I think a real passion of mine is giving back to the science industry and really encouraging people to get into STEM, and also opening up all the different career options that just didn't exist when I came out of university. So yes, I've been at SRG ever since, and mainly now work with clients just to support them with different solutions and market insights. So that's kind of been my career journey so far.
Brilliant. Thank you, Philippa. And Viren?
Perfect. So I actually studied civil engineering, very different to what I'm doing now. And I actually came across New Scientist magazine when I was in one of our civil engineering departments. So that was my first introduction to science, really. So I've been within the sort of job board sector for over 10 years, and I focused in various different sectors from IT to more generic with a company called Total Jobs, and moved over to New Scientist Jobs, very fortunately, who I've been with for over 6 years. So it's been a real good journey, and I've learned a lot through the different sectors I've worked in particular. I think New Scientist is one of my longest stints, and purely because I've got a really good passion for really large passion for science, and I really enjoy the people I work with. So very fortunate, very lucky there, and helping us sort of expand to the US as well. So it's been a really good journey.
Brilliant, wonderful. So I can actually see we've got a question in the chat box already, which is brilliant, and I think it might be important to maybe cover. Just quickly pick up on it now, and yeah, just to reiterate that if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop these in the chat box. So one perhaps for both of you to comment on. It says, thanks for the presentation. Do you have median salary information? Is that very different from average salary? And how about salary according to years of experience?
So we have. That's a very good question. I will have to come back to you on that one. I think we do have the data on years of experience, and And median salaries, we don't, but it is something we can work out. So I don't have that comparison to hand, unfortunately.
Wonderful, thank you. So I just wanted to pick up as well on the kind of differences in gender pay, and there's probably a lot of different variables that are causing this, but
Yes.
one in particular that could potentially be causing this gender pay gap is the approaching salary negotiation. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this, and how you think this may be kind of contributing to females maybe not feeling as confident when it comes to salary negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, I can cover a bit of this. So I think it kind of goes back to, I guess, education and grassroots. I think there's a lot of gender stereotypes, unfortunately, that do exist in STEM. Certainly when I was at university, it's very much engineering is a male-led subject. We've seen that in pockets with chemistry. Biology is more for women. So I think it's really important, all those steps have been taken already, that we continue to remove those stereotypes that exist within STEM. We do generally, from our observations, tend to see a high level of imposter syndrome set in with female candidates. So I think it's really important to support people with that imposter syndrome, which can kind of come up at any stage in their career. And then I think a lot of it comes back to flexibility. Generally, we tend to find that females do need a high level of flexibility, particularly if they've got commitments, or they're working part-time, or they have dependents outside of work. So I think it's making sure companies can recognise that need for flexibility. But I think when it comes to asking for a salary increase or a change of job, or more flexibility, there's certainly lots of recommendations we can make. I think it's about understanding your value, it's understanding your worth to that business, but I think it's important that you do your research. The survey that we've seen this morning, the results that have already shown that there's huge gaps. I don't think that gap is going to close immediately, but we need to keep taking steps. And while some of the results today are a little bit disappointing and then it's slightly taken a step back, we just need to keep addressing this. So I think it's about doing your research, it's understanding your value and what you're bringing to that business, and then it's sitting down and having that sort of open discussion with your manager. But I think imposter syndrome is a really big issue that can affect a lot of female candidates.
Thank you, Philippa. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that, Viren?
I think Philippa covered it really well. And she covered a couple of really key points, I think, and that is, we have to do our research and know what the average salaries are for the level, for your job level. And it is having, if you're able to, have a very open chat with your manager. But really, it's not about I want a raise sort of conversation. It's more about, this is my value. This is what I've done. This is what I've achieved over the last 2 years. This is a salary that I've researched. This is the average salary that I should be on, and I'm not quite there yet. How do I achieve that? And that's how is another really good way of approaching that conversation, because it is quite a tough conversation to have.
Just to sort of add to that, I mean, I think there's definitely lots of support and advice we can give candidates, but I think what we need to recognise here is that companies need to play their part. Yes. And often there is a lot of emphasis on the candidate and them going and approaching the company, but a company needs to recognise what can they do, how are they supporting women in their business. So yeah, I think there has to be a lot of emphasis on the as well. What does their employee value proposition look like?
Yeah.
How are they building that equality, looking at those salary discrepancies? And we've definitely seen some great examples of where companies have been really open and vulnerable to say, yeah, we do have a massive pay gap, but this is what we're going to do to address it. So I think it's okay to be vulnerable and admit that mistakes have been made, but it's about what you're going to do about that forward.
Brilliant. Are you kind of noticing any kind of trends between the types of companies as well that are doing this really, really well? Is it different between the slightly smaller biotechs and the larger pharma because they've got maybe more resource, or?
That's a good question. I mean, I I would say I see it less in startups because I think there's a lot more transparency. And I tend to find with startups, it's very skills-led recruitment. So we do tend to see a much more diverse workforce. We tend to see more transparency in salaries, and there's a real trend in recruitment now where candidates are talking more openly about salary. So I encourage that salary transparency because hopefully it will foster more open discussions. But I would say I tend to see it less so in startups. I don't know, Viren, if you've noticed it in sort of larger companies at all.
I think it's a bit more difficult with large companies. I mean, there's a lot of great initiatives that the large corporates have started, and they are ongoing. I would encourage everyone to take an interest in the business you work in and try and get involved. Absolutely, with the D&I projects, and especially the gender pay gap. I think last year it was perhaps it was pre-COVID. Where there was a lot of media businesses in particular. There's moving out life sciences topic ever so slightly, but making a comparison. A lot of media businesses, the gender pay gap was quite significant within science writers, for example. So what New Scientist done was come out and send a very open email to everyone and say we want to rebalance the salaries. It's not where they should be and it's not correct. So they found a sort of the average salary for your job role and sort of brought everyone to the right level they should be to reduce that gap. So it's something that companies need to address themselves, absolutely. And I would encourage, if you are in a medium-sized business, then perhaps take on a project like this and perhaps not just yourself, but encourage HR to have a look at this in a bit more detail, and see if that would help the business as well. I'm sure a lot of businesses right now would be very open to even having a conversation or at least doing a detailed research on it.
Brilliant. Thank you. So obviously we know that when you're securing a job, it's not all about the salary. But I'm interested in what you guys are maybe seeing from a candidate's perspective in terms of their priorities when they're accepting a position within a company. Is it the kind of the passion for the science, or are you seeing people be a little bit maybe more demanding for those higher salaries?
I mean, it's a difficult one to answer because it's so individual. We speak to so many candidates and you have so many different conversations, but I think largely pay is very important. I think unfortunately when you factor in the cost of living now, that's put a lot of strain on people, particularly across the Golden Triangle, where the cost of living, in some areas is a lot higher than the UK average. Mm-hmm. So I think pay is really important, but definitely that meaningful work. Often we speak to candidates who are getting paid very well for what they do, but they don't feel that they're having that impact, or they're not seeing how their work is contributing to the bigger picture. So I think candidates are very driven by the science, by meaningful work. And I think which comes in a really, really close second to pay is that flexibility. And I think we kind of need to move away from the narrative that flexibility is just about working from home. It could be that somebody starts early and finishes early. It may be that they have somebody that they care for outside of work and they need to take a longer lunch twice a week or something like that. So we need to really think about flexibility and understand that it's not a one size fits all. And we've seen a movement of talent because they're just not getting that flexibility, and it's starting to really impact their sort of personal life. So I think for companies to remain really competitive, to attract the best talent, you have to have a very flexible policy, and it needs to be one that's ever evolving, because flexibility means so many things to so many people.
I think trust is a really key point as well, right? It's businesses trusting their employees, and we've seen a lot more trust given to employees when talking about flexibility and working from home. But it also empowers the employee as well to say that, you know what, I am trusted, and that is actually quite far-reaching as well, right? So I think trust element's really important for businesses to offer that as well, and not micromanage, especially when you're working flexibly.
Yeah, definitely. And I fully appreciate when I work with some of our clients, lab-based work, it's difficult because in many cases you have to obviously be in the lab.
Yeah.
But like I say, it's about looking at how else can you be flexible. And you're quite right, it's about trust. If people feel trusted and valued by their employer, then that just fosters great employee engagement. So that's something we really encourage our clients, particularly when we work with startups. We will advise them on what does flexibility look like and how can that work for them to achieve their business goals, but enable them to attract the best talent.
Excellent. I think that's some really, really great points. And I like the fact that you've mentioned that it's always evolving. How often do you think that employers should be having these kind of conversations with their teams?
I mean, I guess there's a correlation between, I'm really passionate about driving diversity in STEM. We've seen some of the figures today from Viren's presentation, which is quite shocking. So I think diversity needs to be at the heart of this as well. So I think as companies create more diverse workforce, which is what they should be doing, it's about constantly reflecting on that, what flexibility means, because it will mean a different thing to each person. So I would encourage companies to be reviewing this on a regular basis, whether that be monthly, quarterly. I guess it depends on the size of your organisation. But I think it's about fostering a culture where you have very open discussions. I think if you can be open and honest with your employer, it just creates much better dialogue. So yeah, I would say as regular as possible, really, to reflect the workforce.
Brilliant. So over the last kind of couple of years or so, we've seen quite a huge drive in recruitment, and there's been lots of talk around it being a candidate-driven market. And I'm just curious as to what kind of trends you think we can start to emerge as we get deeper into 2023.
I think for me, I don't know if it's new trends or whether it's just a continuation of what we've seen sort of post-COVID. I mean, COVID was a bit of a reset, wasn't it, for all of us, really? And I think it allowed us to take a really good look at ourselves, look at the market. So for me, it's a continuation. I think first and foremost, diversity and inclusion continues to be a really key focus around recruitment. A lot of clients are continuing to define their diversity and inclusion goals, and then it's about creating very clear measures to ensure that you're achieving milestones. Another big trend that we continue to see is that skill-based recruitment. So this, in a sense, it can widen your talent pool and can actually improve your time to hire. And it creates a much more diverse workforce. So in many situations, we see job descriptions are very much targeting the skills. Often our clients will ask the question, do we even need to ask for a degree? Is it even relevant to this job? It should be about the skills. And we're seeing a real trend where people are using tests to evaluate those hard skills, and then innovative tests to really look at those soft skills. So we're really shifting the focus away from education and how many years experience. It's about those skills, which I think can be so well applied to the life sciences industry. Sort of other trends I'd say is there's a real focus on defining career paths and that internal mobility, whether that's a promotion, whether that's a lateral move. So it's about making sure you work with your learning and training department to make sure you've got effective programs. But I think what's really key, and a trend that we're really seeing, is educating leaders to recognise those opportunities and upskilling internally, particularly when there are skill shortages. And I've seen some fantastic examples. A small biotech I work with were really struggling to look for certain stem cells candidates. So they did a massive big internal initiative and completely upskilled lots of their laboratory technicians. And now they've all got all these extra skills. They feel really empowered and are probably likely to stay with the company for quite a long time. I think other trends is companies having a focus on their employee value proposition. So being really clear about what your values are, what your beliefs are, and then embedding that into your hiring process. So the people that you are bringing on align with those values and that culture, because particularly for growing biotechs, it's quite hard. You want to maintain that culture. So I think it's so important to bring that into your recruitment strategy. And then I think, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing an increased trend of pay transparency. People are talking about their salaries and are very open about it. So I think it's so important that companies address those discrepancies to make sure they can then attract, good candidates. So I would sort of say they're the main trends that we're seeing this year, but they very much started sort of as we came out of COVID.
Thanks, Philippa. What are you seeing from your perspective, Viren?
I think from a job board perspective, we have seen, I think, looking at trends, if we look at something short term, especially with everything that's happening with the cost of living and people movement within businesses is definitely, it's definitely impacted this. And we've seen job volume and job advertisement has reduced, in particular for January and February. However, we are seeing a bit more of an uplift this month, and hopefully that trend would continue. I think it's offering sort of a bit more confidence in the market, that the candidates aren't sort of hesitant of moving right now, which would be really positive for sort of job development. I think at the moment people are trying to be a bit more secure where they are, which is completely understandable, right, with the cost of living crisis. But the positive is that we are moving out of that right now, which is really good. I think it's going to be a bit of an interesting year to see how the global markets affect businesses in the UK, Europe and America. But we are seeing sort of hiring starting again, which is fantastic news. I'm really, really glad to hear that. I think also similar to what Philippa mentioned was employer value propositions. We've seen a huge increase of our clients wanting to promote their employer brand in a very different way, but also to share, the videos and really share exactly what it's like to work for them. And I think that's quite hard to show just, on a job description, right? So people are going more social, recruitment campaigns are going more social. They're going more open, and really sharing sort of some of the initiatives they're doing as well. So it's really great to hear. There's some really great initiatives that are happening within some life sciences businesses that I've seen. So hopefully that trend continues, especially on sort of the junior level, which I'd love to see. And really, I'm hoping for the future, a little bit off track here, but we have initiatives in place to keep the talent that we do have in the UK, right? We have seen the salaries being a lot higher in the US, but obviously there's a lot of different variables there as well. So that's really worth bearing in mind, and it's something we really need to focus on keeping our talent in the UK. But yeah.
Thanks, Viren. So do you think with job ads kind of decreasing on the job boards, do you think that is because people are using platforms like LinkedIn more, that because they've developed their employee value propositions, their candidates are gravitating more towards their websites or LinkedIn profiles?
No, it is a global. I've looked at my research forms from looking at every single site, and there is it's not just the UK, it's also looking at 22 different job boards in the US. Globally, jobs have reduced in terms of advertisement, so it's not sort of a moving trend to any other platform. It's generally, I think the general feeling of uncertainty right now, but hopefully we're breaking through that, so that's positive.
Brilliant. So you both kind of mentioned the importance of upskilling and internal promotions. But what kind of advice would you give to somebody that's within a company that's looking to negotiate salary? Because that can be quite different to somebody that's looking for a new role and having to negotiate that with somebody that they've maybe only met in a couple of interviews.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take this one. I think if you're already working for a company and you're asking sort of for a pay rise, I think similar to what we mentioned earlier, it's about doing your research. So go away, do your research. You know, look at, I mean, the great beauty of the internet now is there's a lot of information that we can go and reach out to. Obviously, I'd always encourage people to look at New Scientist as well, of course. But yeah, or if you're working, worked with a recruiter previously, you know, pick up the phone, have a chat to a recruiter. So I think do your research by salaries, industries. I would encourage people to schedule a convenient time with their manager, and I would definitely encourage people to sit down face to face. I think it just fosters a much more open and authentic discussion. I think it's about being positive and confident, really understanding value that you bring to the business. You know, I would definitely advise people to make notes. I'm a big note taker. Take that padding with you. It keeps you on track, and it's about using very positive language. Often when people ask for pay rises, they'll sort of almost talk themselves down, or they'll almost apologise. There's absolutely nothing wrong to have that discussion with your manager. But I think it's about keeping it quite factual as well. So thinking about what you've achieved, if you've got any data to support that, or if it's any sort of competencies. You know, a lot of companies will have competency measures. So where were you last year compared to where you are now? Yeah, and I think it's about just having that sort of open, honest discussion. I'd always advise people that you're not going to get a response straight away. I think you've got to give your manager and your business time to go away and reflect, but then obviously make sure you have a follow-up meeting. And don't be afraid to ask for extra responsibility as well. There might be something you really want to get involved in, a project you're interested in. So I think really reiterating that you're interested to increase your responsibility or get involved in a different area of the business, I think that's a really good time to sort of mention that as well. So that would be my advice to candidates. But I do understand that sometimes imposter syndrome or that confidence can set in. So I think if you've got notes and you've kind of done your homework beforehand, I think that can help alleviate some of that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Philippa. So just to remind everyone, if you have got any questions, please feel free to pop these in the chat box and we'll pick them up from there. I can see we had another one come in slightly earlier. And this one, I think it's talking to kind of the data that you guys might have. So do you have any color about type of organization, for example, pharma, cell and gene, large and small biotech, tech bio, CRO, CDMO, IBD, equipment manufacturer, and lab reagents? And do you have any regional differences in the UK? Oh, you're on mute, Viren. Oh, still on mute.
Would not be the first time. Yes, we do have regional variations, and we'll be covering that in the final report as well. Regarding sort of being quite specific in the different sectors, we have got salary breakdowns for different areas, different sectors. So engineering and looking at farmers. I can't remember the different sectors that we have from the top of my head, but we have got a breakdown, but we don't have it down to the level of looking at sort of CROs and sort of tech bios or biotechs potentially. And one of the big reasons for that is to make sure that we've got a good enough sample size, because if we don't have enough people or enough respondents for a very specific area, then the data can be skewed a little bit. So we're just conscious of that. But yeah, please do keep an eye out for the regional salaries.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got another question that's just come in. A lot of recruitment agencies for life science focus on the actual scientists. What about the admin support staff in life sciences? I organise life science events with event management and operational support. Where would you suggest I find opportunities to gain clients or contract work?
I can take this one. I mean, admittedly, our key focus is obviously sort of science, clinical and engineering. I guess the best way to answer that would be, if you are looking for sort of opportunities and obviously looking to gain clients or contract work, I think networking is a really good thing to do. Not just saying that because I'm with One Nucleus now, but I really value networking. And actually often, because of what we do, we often speak to support staff. So whilst we don't claim to be experts in recruiting for those skills, we definitely obviously speak to a lot of candidates in that area. So my advice would be networking and also referral. I think because we work in such the incestuous world of life sciences, I think referrals are a really good way to connect with people and really just get yourself out there. And I think when you're speaking to people, just be confident about your personal brand and what you feel you can offer that may differentiate you from somebody else doing a very similar role. So I hope that's sort of helpful and answers your question.
Thanks, Philippa. Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question, actually, and just kind of expanding on the networking thing. I think if you can find a mentor who can perhaps point you in the right direction as well, that's also super, super valuable. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that one, Viren?
No, I think Philippa covered really well, to be fair.
Perfect, wonderful. So with the salary survey, do you know when this is going to be widely available?
So we will share, I mean, if it's useful, we can share that on the One Nucleus website of when the launch is going to happen. But it'll be next month. So yeah, keep an eye on it. There's no, I will come back to you on a fixed date.
Sounds good. So what are the kind of next steps after the salary survey with the data? What's the kind of work that we might expect to see come out of this?
So it'll be an overview, a little bit different to sort of what we've done in the past, where we usually create a 20-page report detailing into the different areas of interest. However, this time we're making it a little bit easier to read and share with more graphics than we've had before. So it's just information that quite punchy information that you can pick out very, very quickly. So it's a much easier, it's an easier report to digest very quickly. I think that's the best way of putting it. So that's what we have in store, and we are potentially looking at some other more specific surveys potentially this year. It's very early on, so I don't know whether I should mention it. But we haven't covered any of the topics in the survey itself. So it's a very specific D&I report, but it's targeting a specific community. And yeah, so we are potentially, it's very early days, so I shouldn't really say much. But yeah, it's definitely an exciting report that we're going to be doing. And yeah, just keep an eye out, and I'll certainly be sharing the information on One Nucleus.
Brilliant, thank you. It's great to have a sneak preview. We're all hooked now. And we'll keep an eye out. I just wanted to come back to actually just the question and the title of this panel discussion, because when we talk about the earning potential, maybe it isn't totally monetary. And I just wanted to hear from your kind of personal perspectives and based on your experience about what you feel is the earning potential from learning from working in life sciences.
I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about salary today, and I don't want to discard salary. It's obviously really important, and I think it's about creating a salary that works for you, that obviously is acceptable and you feel like you're being paid fairly for your work. But I think sort of beyond salary, what I always encourage candidates, it's about setting those career goals. Often scientists have very clear ideas of things that they want to be involved in, projects they want to work with. If we take the drug discovery process as a good example, that there's milestones within that process. So I'd always encourage candidates to look at opportunities where they get exposure to certain projects, they get to be involved, to make critical decisions. Perhaps it's a candidate that's about to go to clinic. So it's it's looking at pay, absolutely, but it's also defining what do you want to get from your science career, what are your milestones, and what companies could potentially offer that. And then I think overarching is defining your own values as an individual. What's important to you? What culture do you want to work in? What values are important for you to achieve those career goals? And then again, that's where the employee value proposition comes in play. Companies need to be really clear in their branding and their story that goes to market. Does that company align with those core values that you're looking for? So I think that answers the question. I mean, pay is important, don't get me wrong, but I think it is only one factor. I think when it comes to scientists, it's a lot more complex than just pay.
Thanks, Philippa. And Viren, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Philippa covered that really well as well. I mean, I would sort of completely agree with Philippa in that, you know, salary is one piece, and it's a very important piece. Don't get me wrong. And if we look at the salary survey, the trends are up, right? So that's super positive. I think a key factor is really, you know, your passion and what you want to work in, and the projects that are available to you, right? So, you know, one would only look at another business within life sciences if it's a project that you have experience in, right? So, and it's something you want to help develop and grow. So it is about, I suppose there's a larger conversation to be had here about the government's sort of investment into life sciences, and our sort of future partnerships with our neighbours, the EU. And I've seen a couple of partnerships of late that I've read about. I say less so seen, but more so read, of partnerships still sort of growing and happening, and investment sort of changing hands. So that's really positive. And I think, well, I hope that we sort of continue that trend as well. Because we have a very strong life sciences base in the UK, with startups spinning out from universities, and standalone startups happening all the time. So you know, the earning potential can be huge, you know, and if, you know, I would definitely encourage everyone to just, you know, stick to your passion, and absolutely, you know, salary is key. But the trend is upwards, and hopefully we're all moving to, you know, hopefully in a short term, we are looking at sort of reducing that pay gap as well, both diversity and gender. So hopefully the future looks bright. So fingers crossed on that one.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So just kind of one final call out really. If we've got any more questions, please feel free to pop these in the chat box. But yeah, it's been fantastic to speak to you both today and get a real insight into what the market is currently like in life sciences, and yeah, some really great advice shared for candidates looking to either grow and develop a career within life sciences, or maybe considering their first step. So yeah, thank you so much, Philippa and Viren, today. It's been great to speak with you.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
That's all right. So just as well, thank you to the audience. Thank you so much for coming. We are back at midday. So we've got our lunchtime session, and it's how do you recognise value beyond qualifications? It'd be wonderful if you could join us. Just to remind you as well, please familiarise yourself with all of the great features that we've got on the app. There's networking on the dashboard. We've also got some time in the afternoon for partnering, so please feel free to book in meetings. We've got some of our expert speakers that are available, which is great. And also we have our Life Sciences Inspiration of the Year award, which will be announced tomorrow, and voting is still open. So if you haven't voted already, please go and vote via the app. So yeah, thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session.
Thank you.